All right, time to take a look through the international headlines. Alison Sargent is back with me. Alison, good to see you again. We're going to start in Israel, where jailed Palestinians have begun a hunger strike.
Yeah, I thought we'd start with some reaction in the Arabic language press. Our colleague over at the Arabic channel pulled out an article from a Palestinian paper called Al-Quds. The paper explains that this hunger strike comes after punitive measures were taken against Palestinian prisoners. In particular, they were put in isolation and deprived of family visits. Now, this paper blames the Israeli authorities for the strike and calls on them to apply international law for Palestinian prisoners, who they say are actually prisoners of war. Now, this newspaper also shows its solidarity with the prisoners in a drawing. The caption there says, "Hunger strike, second day." The prisoners have received a lot of support from Palestinians. Thousands of people demonstrated yesterday in the West Bank.
Right, and not all papers are showing the same level of support for the hunger strike. What are newspapers in Israel saying?
So, Israeli papers are focusing on the man who's leading the strike. That's one prisoner in particular, Marwan Barghouti. He's also a Palestinian leader. He published an editorial in the New York Times Monday, and it's drawing a lot of attention in Israel, not for its content, but because the New York Times actually didn't mention that Marwan Barghouti is in prison for murder. They simply call him a Palestinian leader and parliamentarian. So this really outraged Israeli politicians who called the paper irresponsible and said that they gave a platform to a terrorist. We can take a look also at that original op-ed in the New York Times. They've now updated it with an editor's note. They say they neglected to provide sufficient context and added that he is convicted of 5 counts of murder. There's also an interesting analysis piece in left-wing Israeli paper Haaretz today that says that this strike isn't just about the struggle against Israel, it's also about a struggle for Palestinian leadership. Barghouti is seen as a potential successor to Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, and Haaretz says that the media attention from this strike would actually really help him gain a level of respect and popularity. And the Palestinian Authority is officially supporting this strike, but according to Haaretz, Mahmoud Abbas and those loyal to him are actually worried that it's going to give a new political standing to Barghouti.
All right, moving on to another power struggle taking place on the Korean peninsula. On his visit to South Korea, the American Vice President Mike Pence reiterating the US's firm stance against North Korea.
Yeah, this is front page news across the region today. We can start by looking at the Korean paper Junong Daily. They say Pence warns the North not to test Trump. And in its editorial, this paper actually welcomes the hard stance that's being taken by the American vice president. In particular, they say his affirmation that the U.S. will continue to roll out that THAAD anti-missile defense system. Now, the anti-missile defense system is meant to make Koreans feel more secure faced with all these threats from North Korea. But the Washington Post reports today that there's another threat that's making South Koreans anxious, and that's Donald Trump. The paper says that Koreans are used to living in a technical state of war with North Korea, who they ignore, quote, much as one could ignore a combative uncle at Thanksgiving. So it's kind of a peaceful state with that. But the Washington Post talked to so many South Koreans who say they now worry actually more about Donald Trump than about Kim Jong-un, and also about the combination of the two that could really escalate tensions. And you can see this dynamic illustrated in a cartoon today in the Washington Post by Tom Tolles. We see Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump entering the ring, and the referee is saying, "Stop, you can't both use the same name." And if we look on their t-shirts, we can see that name they're both using is the Madman.
All right, well, staying with Donald Trump, the American president got to enjoy some sport yesterday, not in the boxing ring, but at the annual White House Easter egg hunt.
Yeah, this is was the president's first ever Easter egg roll. It's a White House tradition. And the Washington Post reports that it's not the most important event, but it does lead to some fun anecdotes and some fun photos. You can see him there with that giant Easter bunny. And one moment that got particular attention yesterday was when Donald Trump took a hat from someone, signed it, and then appeared to throw it back into the crowd rather than giving it back to the person who had handed it to him. So people went really wild criticizing this. But video later emerged that showed the incident from another angle, and we actually see that the owner of the hat then catches it. So one NBC journalist sent out a tweet clarifying the incident. He said, "Y'all are making too much of this. Trump doesn't randomly throw the hat into the crowd. He tossed it up jokingly, and then the guy catches it and does say thank you."
So who knew a White House Easter egg hunt could be quite so controversial?
Right.
Thank you very much for the international roundup there, Alison.